What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the Vicktory Life Legacy Podcast. I'm your host, owner, and founder of Vicktory Life, Dwight Vick, joined by my brother and longtime co-host and one of my close friends, Danny Nokes. We took a bit of a break, but we're back in it because this is kickoff week, not only for college football. Week 0 was last week, but this week is official for college football, all conferences, all divisions, including high school football, which I was just telling Danny here a second ago, kicks off tomorrow. So we have a lot to talk about. We got two guests joining us today. Danny, how you holding up? How you feeling?
I'm hanging in there, buddy. I'm just glad that we finally have some Virginia Tech football to look forward to this weekend. It's been a long summer, but so welcome to have that Hokie anticipation that frankly we've been missing for not just the whole offseason, but when you talk about the expectations coming into the season for Tech, which we'll get into. It's been a long time since we've had something like this. So I'm glad to be chopping it up with you again, bud.
Yeah, man, I'm dusting off, I'm getting ready to get my parlays going. Everything got two fantasy football drafts coming this week because the season in the NFL kicks off the following Thursday. So this is a great time of the year. Of course, to my September babies, the Virgos, September is my birthday month, so we celebrate the entire month. And real quick, Danny, before we talk tech and other stuff, I was in Springfield Mall. For those that don't know, I live in Northern Virginia, been up here 25 years. And I got the big chain for the big games. Got the big chain for the big games.
Look at that. Look at that, man. That's
Big
awesome. I
chain,
love it.
big change for the big games, man. So when we got the big games and we recording, we're gonna have it. I'm not even gonna put it on. I don't even want to jinx it because it is what it is. It'll be selective, only selective, man. Having fun. Speaking of fun, man, I do a radio segment with Big Dog Sports Talk Radio every
Mhm.
Thursday morning. I know you probably see me tweet about it as well as Instagram. And one of the questions I was asked on Rick show, Rick Watson, shout out to Rick Watson. It's based out of Southwest Virginia, man. Big Dog Sports Radio. It comes on the Bear. And he asked me about my pick, so to speak, about Georgia Tech and Florida State. And I told him, and you may have heard the audio, I said, I wouldn't be surprised if Georgia Tech pulls off that game. I said, I was very adamant I would not be surprised because I really felt like Georgia Tech is one of those teams, you can't sleep on them because their quarterback had 37 touchdowns last year. They had that crazy win over Miami when Miami wet the bed. All they had to do was kneel and they fumble the ball, and Georgia Tech then throws a couple of passes and they win the game in regulation. So they're a team you have to beat. They're feisty, and I felt like that was a setup for Florida State because it's a conference game, a conference opener, a season opener, and you're in Ireland. Okay, travel alone will get you off schedule and off kilter. Plus, I said on the show as well that that kind of loss that early in the season puts you behind in the ACC championship race because technically Georgia Tech owns the tiebreaker, and now you're two games down in the standings of the ACC. Did you happen to chance to watch that game?
I did, and it was first of all, it was a great game. It was a lot of fun to watch, and it was surprising to watch Florida State so easily go down the field on that first drive, cap it off with a 2-point conversion, and then equally as surprising to see Georgia Tech immediately match it, and then they were basically neck and neck the rest of the game. I thought it was a very hard fought football game, especially from Georgia Tech's perspective. It's tough for a guy like DJ Uiagalelei, the quarterback for Florida State. His name's already a mouthful, right? And he's on, I think, school number 3 since he's a couple schools removed from Clemson at this point, and he's definitely not going to shake that negative narrative with a game like that. So we'll see if they can bounce back. There's a lot of season to go, but that's not a good start for them.
Yeah, it isn't, and it's just it's crazy, man, because you talked about how excited that the season's finally here. We're a few days away. I am too, because I am so over the predictions and proclamations. I think it gets to be too much. Now, if you ask me as a Tech guy, Tech alumni, former player, fan, am I loving the attention and the previews and the picks and Tech could be a championship team in the playoffs? Absolutely. It's cool. It's good. We're relevant. But it's all talk because the same pundits that are praising you and picking you to win the conference or be in the top 4 will be the same ones if you lose to Vanderbilt, you won't be heard of again. And that's the beauty and danger of college football, unlike basketball where they play up to 40 games. Basketball, you have the opportunity to make up. It starts in October, season kicks off in November, and goes all the way to March with conference tournaments and things like that, and then the NCAA tournament. Football, man, as much as excited as we are about it, this is over in December. It's over in
Yeah.
December. It is. Even if you make the playoff, it's going to be over in January. And only 12 teams make the playoff. The other ones go to bowl games, which we've seen, unfortunately, bowl games have become, that candy in Willie Walker's factory that no one wants to eat. It's that it's that licorice, bowl games are
Yeah.
not viewed the same, even though I'm very happy we won our bowl game last year. With that being said, we got Chris Coleman joining us from Tech Sideline here in about 10 minutes, but we're going to dive even more about Virginia Tech. But when you look at the landscape of the ACC, and we'll definitely get Chris' thoughts on this and even Matt's if we can, but when you look at the ACC, what are teams we know we think Tech returning 20 of their 22 starters from last year, but when you look at the other teams, who stands out to you?
Well, I think that conversation certainly has to start with the more talented teams near the top, and that's Clemson. We would have included Florida State in that conversation before week 0, and you probably still do because Virginia Tech fans know you can drop the first 2 games of the season and end up winning the ACC championship, right? That's what happened in 2010 when they lost to Boise State, then went and got beat by JMU at home before rattling off 10 in a row to go win the ACC. Difference. I know. No, sir. Hey, you know what? JMU fans don't like to remember that season either because they ended up finishing 6-6, and that's still
Mm-hmm.
their claim to fame. And Virginia Tech went on to win the ACC, but nobody wants to talk about that. Anyway,
Mm.
the difference is also that neither of those was an ACC game. So Florida State starts real far behind, as you alluded to just a couple of minutes ago. But so a team like Miami is also one that you can't write off. I mean, the same way that people talk about how Miami's never going to be back. They get so many good recruits that it's also kind of hard to just label them irrelevant. They're
Yeah,
definitely
so
not
much talent.
irrelevant. They have a
Yeah, so
ton of
much
talent on
talent.
that team, and they're going to have a pretty good, a talented quarterback taking snaps there as well this year, and Virginia Tech's gonna get a crack at them. So I outside of that though, I think Virginia Tech is in that conversation. When you look at a team that returns almost every single player on both sides of the ball, and especially all the production that came from Kyron Jones and Tootin on offense, and Ollie Jennings wasn't even there for most of last season. I get where the hype is coming from. It makes me equally excited and nervous because it's been a long time since there's been this type of expectation on this Virginia Tech program. I think you go back to 2011 and Logan Thomas, his
Mm,
year as the starter, and
mm,
David Wilson
mm,
being there, right? I was a freshman
mm-hmm.
at Radford that year, right before I got to Blacksburg.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
those I think are probably the 4 most talented teams, but I also don't think you can write off NC State. NC State's a good football team. They're going to be tough to beat. I don't think they're going to be quite as strong as they were last year. But another team that is going to go out there and fight tooth and nail every single weekend, I think. So Virginia Tech's schedule sets up pretty nicely though. And I know we'll get into more of that as we talk about some of the specific topics going into this game against Vanderbilt, which Tech is a 2-touchdown favorite in. But
What?
yeah, Tech is a 2-touchdown favorite.
I haven't looked. I've been looked since last week.
Yeah,
I'll be honest with you, man. I'm not gonna lie to you. I don't even know anything about Vanderbilt. The closest thing I got to Vanderbilt, I got a letter from them a few times in high school. Those interest
nice.
letters. Yeah, I mean, not an offer. It was just that's back when you used mail. Now it's DMs and text messages. But I'm dating myself. But I got a letter, and I was like, my dad was like, "Yeah, they're in Tennessee," and I was like, "Cool." And the closest I got to them was the Music City Bowl. We went up
Oh,
there and we watched the Vikings when Randy Moss and Chris Carter were playing. They played some NFL team. Might have been Tennessee. It might have been Tennessee because I think Tennessee's field was the stadium was being built. And I was like, oh, this place looks cool. I mean, it wasn't eye opening. I don't know. It just it was what it was. I'm glad we're a 2-touchdown favorite, but again, like the proclamations and sporting news picks and Andy Bitter's and David Till's list. It's voting. I will say this, and I've done ACC Media Day, and you have as well, right? Before, haven't you?
Yep.
Yeah, I did
Yep.
it
Three
years
times.
ago. Yeah, three. Look at you. I did it one and a half or twice. I don't know if you said and a half because I might have left early or something, but I remember doing it, and I got to vote on who was going to win it. And Kyle Bailey and I did it. Shout out to our guy Kyle Bailey, but it was one of those things where I left thinking, no one really knows. We
Mm,
were picked to be sixth this year, which I tweeted
mm,
perfect. But I was a little bit surprised. But I think if you take a step back, if we take the maroon and orange glasses off, not that you and I are homers,
sure.
but the
Right.
truth of the matter is, I think you got to remind yourself that this is year three with Pryor and
Mm,
company, right?
mm-hmm,
This is year three. So
mm-hmm,
that's a
mm-hmm.
huge jump. It's very doable and it could happen, but I think that's about right. I think if you ask me, my goal is to win eight or more games and be in contention with
Yep.
the opportunity to win it and play for it, but definitely go to a better bowl because it's a progression. And I've been part of the build of Virginia Tech. I was there when it kind of first got going. I mean, and I remember each year we got better and better, and the expectations got bigger and bigger. But it really just starts in that locker room, and it starts with just understanding what kind of team you are. The one thing I love about Tech now, you and I touched on this on our pod, as well as you and I were featured on Boundary Corners panel, is that Virginia Tech has an identity now. Um, I know now with drones in the offense and the running backs and the receivers, God knows we have receivers. Good Lord. And the defense, that lunch pail mentality is there. And it doesn't feel like manufactured hype. It doesn't feel like they're trying to
No.
really this is like, okay, you see it and you believe it. Um, you feel what I'm saying? You get what as far as the
Absolutely.
identity. Yeah.
It's not like I won't go as far to say as it feels like the good old days, but it feels like they're on track, right? I mean,
Yeah.
some of the years under Fuente, they trotted that lunch pail out there when, when Coach Foster was still on the staff, and I guess even under their last defensive coordinator, they would, they kind of still tried to, but it wasn't evidenced on the field, right? I mean, you didn't see the same type of defense being played on the field as and where you look back at the past and everything seems a little bit better than it may have been, right, under Coach Foster. And he's an all-time great, one of the great assistant coaches in college football history. But I think that they are getting back to that, like you said, identity, right? They're getting back to run the football. They do love to run the football, man. It's going to be a lot of Kyron Drones and Tootin. I want to see if the offensive line can improve too. I know that's all the pundits, all of the
Mhm.
tech media, right? All the tech podcasters. That's like the one that's probably the biggest question mark on this team right now. And the good news is they return that entire offensive line. That's great experience. Can they stay healthy? And you could ask that about anybody on either side of the ball. Health is something that you really just have to kind of get a little bit lucky for, like so
Mm.
some of the best
Yeah.
teams in the country, you know, have at least some luck when it comes to staying healthy for the most part through any given year. Now, if you're in Ohio State, right, and Braxton Miller goes down, you can go to JT Barrett and then go to Cardale Jones and still win the national championship, right? That happened 10 years ago, the year that Tech beat them in
Yeah,
Columbus.
and like you mentioned, JMU. Ironically, we finished 6-6 that year, 7-6 with the bowl game win. So what goes around comes around.
I was just about to use the same phrase, man. We're on the same wavelength tonight. It's funny too, just to share a memory too. The 3 years I went to the ACC kickoff were 2016, 17, and 18. So I was there the year that Deshaun Watson and Clemson won the national championship, and the year that Lamar Jackson won the Heisman. So those were some pretty cool years to be involved with the ACC, and I mean, back when you were going, Tech was a lot more relevant, so there was that angle to it as well. They wouldn't let us
Yeah.
interview Lamar Jackson and Deshaun Watson. We weren't
Well,
relevant
we
enough.
we were in that stage where we were relevant, but we were kind of teetering in. Like you knew,
Yeah.
Beamer it was kind of getting ready near the end. I interviewed him, Kyle and I, that day, and we knew at that moment, Beamer. You could tell any high school or college or pro NFL, whatever, NBA, whatever sport, they're kind of at that point where they don't have a handful of years left coaching. Um, I would have found a way though. I would have tried to find somebody, I don't know, a doorman or somebody, man, to interview both those guys. Lamar, and he's so cool too. Like he's a
He
down to earth
is.
guy. I mean, well, first of all, think about that. We talk a lot. I mean, I think we're about to have Chris in, but think about how the ACC in one year had those two quarterbacks. And they had
I
that
know.
big time game where like millions of people watched when they faced off between Louisville and Clemson. And Deshaun, of course, came out on top. But Clemson had a chance. I mean, Louisville had a chance driving at the end. The receiver, I remember, he caught it and went uh, out of bounds, I believe. And he could have
I
kept
think
going
so.
up the field. He was right at the end zone. Yeah, man. And Clemson, I will say this, and Clemson is still Clemson, but
Mhm.
I'd much rather face them now without two legendary quarterbacks and Trevor
Oh
Lawrence
yeah.
and Deshaun Watson, or even Taj Boyd, who was a great quarterback in his own right. You respectfully, it's one reason why Virginia Tech fans have a lot of hope and the team has promise because they have a quarterback. They haven't had a dynamic quarterback like this since Gerard Evans. And when you have a
Hmm.
quarterback like this, it makes your offense that much better, man. So it's a lot to talk about. And the great thing about this conversation is, as we let Chris Coleman on the show, the great thing about all this conversation we've had on all these different platforms and podcasts is this weekend, starting tomorrow. I think there's a college football game on tomorrow.
Hmm.
We end all the speculation. We get to see what's happening. But joining the Legacy Podcast by Vicktory Life is our guy, one of the experts in the business, a guy I've been fan of since I hung up my cleats and helmet at Tech, and that's Tech Sideline's Chris Coleman joining the Legacy Podcast. Chris, how you doing, my guy?
Doing well, Dwight. How are you guys?
Are we good? I want to
Yeah,
tell the
man. Good to
people,
see you, Chris.
Yeah, you
I want
too,
to tell
Danny, man. It's
everybody,
been a while.
It has
yeah,
been.
yeah, it has. I want to tell everybody this is one of my go-tos. And I was waiting to have him on once we had a few games in to get his breakdown. But Coach Fontel mine, excuse me, receivers coach and great recruiter for Tech was supposed to be on, but there was an adjustment with his schedule. So he told me to let everybody know he'll be on one of our next episodes. But I told him, and I joked with Chris when I got Chris on, I said, I'd much rather him get this team ready than to worry about our little old podcast. Don't worry, he was so apologetic. I said, Coach, are you kidding me? You please. I don't want you to be distracted by me. You can talk. I'll text you. We can talk via text. I don't need you to make a way to get on our pod. I appreciate the love. And you know what? Real quick before we jump into Chris' thoughts on this upcoming season, that is such a refreshing difference when I can hit JC Coleman up, Pearson, Marv, Pry, the head coach, Fontel, all these guys, and they're like, hey, let me get clearance to the media and I'll jump on. The accessibility and the fact that they want to talk to fans and guys like us to give us insight is such a breath of fresh air. And it's just really cool. I mean, Chris, you guys got an outstanding platform in Tech Sideline. You guys are the originators. You got a great podcast. Have you seen that with the availability of coaches and player personnel and all those guys?
Yeah, it was I don't remember if it was this summer or last summer, but I sat in Fontel's office and talked recruiting with him for a good 15 or 20 minutes. And, very personable guy, very accessible guy. Really enjoyed talking recruiting. And I think to be a good recruiter, you have to really enjoy recruiting. And
Mm,
because it's not something for everybody. You see a lot of guys, they'll coach in college for a couple of years and they're like, nope, I'm going to the NFL where I don't have to recruit. Right. Like even Tap did that. It didn't. Tap was a
Yeah.
college
yeah.
coach for a year, and then boom, just go into the NFL. But Mines truly enjoys it. So yeah, I've had the same experiences that you
Was it
have.
just a
If
year? Tap was only just 1 year?
Yeah, only 1 year at Tech, and it was the
Oh,
COVID
okay.
year, so it was like he was never here. Yeah, yeah, he
Wow.
was here for 1 year, or maybe, yeah, I think it was just the one. Yep.
Wow. Yeah. We're
if
gonna say,
yeah,
Danny.
I was just going to say, you can definitely, Chris, you can see that across all of the coaching staff, the buy-in to recruiting, right? Because whether it's been Coach Cheetah, right? We've talked to him, Dwight. He's come on the show a couple of times. He's all energized about recruiting. He loves the process. Pearson's a part of it now. They got Pearson all up on social media now. He wasn't like that when he was doing the show with me.
Never. You guys did the pregame show together.
Yep.
Pearson told me when he was there with Fuente, he was like, "Yeah, I'm not really into that." And I know him. I mean, I've known him. We are teammates since 1995. So I know him. He's a low key guy, but he loves it, man. He's like posting and up here in Northern Virginia and going to like 15 different schools on the Beltway. I'm just like, Jesus, you are so not the old Pearson, you know. But Chris, right before you jumped on, Danny and I were talking about, Virginia Tech's expectations and how it's kind of weird almost because we're nearing that time of relevancy where, for the longest time since Fuente stepped down or whatever you want to say was let go, we've been kind of irrelevant. We've been relying more on old videos and, trying to win the state back. And then Pride comes in, and last year they went on a good run and finished the year very strongly. And now all of a sudden we're in the forefront of having a chance to make a great run this year. Obviously, you got to do it on the field, but what do you make of all these expectations and proclamations and predictions and people saying, "Oh, watch out, Virginia Tech, they return this many guys." I struggle with it at first because I want to make sure these guys know how to win. Like I always say, it's important they know how to win because when I got there, we really knew how to win. It was normal to have expectations to win the conference and have a chance to win the Big East and then the ACC and play potentially for a championship, national championship with some of those teams. But this seems like new territory because it hasn't been there in Blacksburg for a while. So you're on the same platforms as me. You guys, Tech Sideline, have a huge following. You have a good pulse on the program. What do you make of all this, the preseason hype?
I can tell that some of the fans that they're kind of like you. They have mixed feelings about it. They're excited, but their expectations are not their expectations. Their excitement level is tempered to a certain extent because they're scared. They're scared they're going to be let down, and you can just see it. There are people scared of Vanderbilt this weekend on our boards, and yeah. Vanderbilt's 2-10. If anybody else in the ACC was playing Vanderbilt, our fans would just assume that they're going to steamroll Vanderbilt, just like Wake Forest did last year, the last 2 years. But because it's Virginia Tech, nope, Vanderbilt might be good, right? Vanderbilt might win the game. And I'm not saying that they don't have a chance. I think they'll be a better team than they were last year. But I do get that feeling of that some people are experiencing that feeling of trepidation. Like, oh my gosh, people are talking about us. A lot of times in the past when Tech has been hyped, we didn't live up to expectations. And when nobody talked about us, oh, you're 0-2 to start 95 or you're 0-2 to start 2010 and people write you off, then you go on that run, right? Or even last year, you start 1-3 or 2019, you start 2-2. And then after that, you go on a run. So it's different, but at the same time, I think you have to embrace those expectations. Ultimately, if nobody's talking about you, that means you haven't been good, and ultimately you want to be consistently good. And if you achieve your goal of being consistently good, that's just something you're going to have to learn to deal with, is dealing with expectations. I agree with you, Dwight, on the learning how to win thing. I think they learned how to blow teams out last year. But if they're in a dogfight in the fourth quarter and it's a 3-point game or a 7-point game, how are they going to handle that? I hope we don't find out this weekend as far as winning a close game. I hope it's, you continue in last year's trend and, blow out teams that aren't Louisville and NC State and Florida State. But at some point this year, they're going to be in a close game in the fourth quarter, and they'll have to show that they know how to win that game.
Great point.
Yeah. I think like it's going to be important for them to handle their business from week to week, right? I think it plays right back into what y'all are saying about learning how to win, not overlooking teams. If we're looking at it on paper, Tech's first real challenge is probably Rutgers, right? Is that fair to say? I mean, not to overlook Vanderbilt, who they are 2 touchdown favorites over, but they're going to be heavy favorites in their next couple of games, obviously against Marshall, ODU. So if Rutgers is that first one, they have to not overlook some of these teams. And I know when it comes to Vanderbilt, Chris, you guys do an amazing job too with your pregame coverage and
The
the
best.
pre. I always tell people it's the first place that I went when I was prepping for pregame shows when I was doing it. It's one of my favorite things. And this Vanderbilt team, what's interesting about them is they've lost a lot of guys to the transfer portal, and they've dipped into the transfer portal to try and bring some of that depth back into the fold. So, as an opponent, I wonder, and they've also had some shakeups in the coaching staff. As an opponent, I wonder that unpredictability that Vanderbilt is seemingly going to have. That might be one of the bigger things that Tech fans should be concerned with.
It's not just the new players; it's a bunch of new coaches.
Yeah,
They've revamped their coaching staff on both sides of the ball. New offensive coaching staff, new defensive backs coach. Lee, the head coach, has made himself defensive coordinator. So obviously those defensive players, now that the head coach is basically their boss, that's going to make you. You're going to be on your game to the best of your ability, because your head coach is all over you all day long. It's not just your position coach. It's not just your coordinator, but the head coach is on you now. So I definitely think there was a focus to, there's no such thing really as, I'm not going to say there's no such thing as rebuilding, but rebuildings don't take as long these days. And there are quicker demands for, you need to be good faster. It shouldn't take 4 years or 5 years or whatever, like it used to. You need to be able to do it faster these days, even for fan bases like Vanderbilt that don't have great expectations. They don't want to go 2-10 either, which is what they've done in 2 of his first 3 years there. So I think they've upgraded their coaching staff. I think they've upgraded their quarterback for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at the roster, I'm not sure they've exactly what kind of upgrades they've brought to the other positions. The other spots seem like more of the same to me. But if their coaching is better, then we'll have a better idea of. I mean, you guys know coaching makes a lot of difference. I mean, Virginia Tech looked like a bad football team for the first part of last year, and then bam, you do a little scheme change, put more motion in the offense, and all of a sudden, those offensive linemen that couldn't hold a block the first 4 games of the season, all of a sudden they can, when you're doing things to make the key reads of linebackers more difficult and things like that. So I would expect a misdirection game plan for Vanderbilt, spread Tech out, try to get running lanes for that quarterback, Pavia, who I think is very good. I do think Vanderbilt will be better this year, but there's so many new faces. It's like 30 new players and new coaches. Are those guys going to be ready to go in week 1? Are they going to be operating at max efficiency in week 1? And what is max efficiency for Vanderbilt? I really don't know.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna say this, and I'm glad I got you on, Chris, because I was asked on Big Dog Sports Radio show a few months ago, and when I was at the Tech spring game, I was upstairs, my cousin Mike and I, my wife, a lot of the old heads, Andre Davis, the OGs, and we were having a really passionate discussion about Tech because we all care, we're all invested, we're former players, alumni, we're up there with the boosters and everything. And I was asked on the radio show and during that time in April, what are you going to look for Pry and his staff to take the next step? And this is a very simple answer for me because I've known this. I say this all the time to even people when I'm at home or hanging out. Virginia Tech has to somehow get over the hump of winning the games they're not supposed to and keep winning the games they're supposed to. And what I mean is, what made Virginia Tech's run special, that started all these expectations and proclamations and predictions years ago, was because when they started the bowl game run, they were beating teams like Texas, like LSU, Texas A&M on the road, playing Alabama tough for 3 quarters. They were able to win these games, especially the number 1 team, which became their rival. Miami hates to admit it, but was Miami. Miami and Tech had hit legendary. If you follow me online, I posted a clip from the 98 game. There were so many big games between Tech and Miami. And Tech, a lot of times, which many people felt Miami outclassed them with talent, it wasn't the case. And when they won those games, ultimately winning the conference, it created this notion where Virginia Tech, if they can win these games, they can play for a national championship. But on the flip side, Danny and Chris, is that we would always, going back to my time, have a game or two when you like, what are you doing? Temple 98, Miami of Ohio 97. The Fuente year when they go up to Syracuse after a great win and they're favored by 3 scores and they lose. And again, we know Syracuse, the Dome, the House of Horrors for Tech, going back to my time. But there's always that game. And if Pride can just get them into a sense of confidence where they beat a Clemson and a Miami or split, but then still win the games again like they're supposed to. Not have a letdown against Rutgers. I know Rutgers is a good team, but they only had 35 yards passing against us last year. That's like that game where Georgia Tech had like 10 yards and they ran the ball up and down the field. So Chris and Danny, Chris, I don't know. Do you get what I'm saying? Like when
Yeah.
those games when you're supposed to win and a game that you have a chance to win and you make it work, whether it's a trick play or you make it happen where you can sustain that momentum,
I
you
think that's
know.
why a lot of people are in holding mode with this team to a certain extent. I think a lot of people expect Tech to go 8-4 or 9-3, but what kind of 8-4 or 9-3 is it going to be?
Mm-hmm.
Last year when they got on that roll and they closed the season pretty strong, counting the bowl game, I think they closed the season 6-3 in their last 9 games.
Yeah.
But like the 6 teams they beat, like what was their best win at Boston College?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Who I believe was a 6 or 7 win team. When they faced a good, physical, tough, smart, disciplined, well-coached team in the trenches, they got punked, for lack of a better word. The Florida State game, it was 21-0. I think Florida State, just like that. Louisville game was never competitive. The final
Mm.
score of NC State ended up being close, but
Yeah.
that was a game that NC State controlled from start to finish, and they won the game in the trenches. So I think yes, you're looking forward and you're needing to see Virginia Tech win one of those games, beat someone that most people classify as a good football team. And
Mm-hmm.
yes, that's taking the next step. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, and before you pose your point, Danny, or question, it I swear, because this is the only team I love. I'm a graduate, hold 2 degrees. This is my heartbeat. I'm a Hokie, right? I don't really have a favorite pro team. I support the local teams up here in the DMV. But for so many years, guys, I've called Chris for therapy. For so many years, I still remember where I was at when we lost to Boston College when they were number 2 and we were number 8. And if we win that game, we jump up and we're going to play for a national championship. There was a debate because LSU destroyed us, but the whole point was you have number 2 at home. And we did that crazy quick kick instead of going for it. And then they got the ball, and you know the history, Matt Ryan, boom, boom, boom. And so many years, guys, it's like, man, if we had just won that game, if we don't lose to Syracuse, if we don't lose to this team, if we just hold off, I'm tired of that. And I know I'm part of those what ifs. Because I mean, my senior year, we lose to Temple. We're ranked 14th. And 6 teams ahead of us lost that day. It was upset Saturday. And I'm like, Temple, and we're up 17-0. I'm in my 40s. I still remember that like it was on homecoming. So anyway, I got to get this off. That's therapeutic for me. I'm good. I can breathe now. But I'm glad, you guys get it with the whole what if, because I think that's his next step for Pride as he builds his program is to be like Daddy. Clemsoning was a term. Oh, and Dabble hated it.
Oh yeah.
Like how I hate the chokies term, right? He was like, "Hey, don't you say that." He would point his finger. I don't. He got on game day. He went off on those guys when they said, "As long as you guys don't Clemsoning," and he got mad. But Clemsoning was a real thing, right? So, and what happened? They went from Clemsoning to the expectation was, oh, they're the class of college football. They're going to win the game. They destroyed Ohio State every time they saw them. They destroyed Florida State. It was crazy how they switched it. Um, anyway, Danny, what are your thoughts on that whole thing? As far as winning, or you have another point you want to make?
Yeah, we're all old enough to remember Clemsoning, right? It seems like it was a long time ago, but it wasn't really that long ago. But
Mm,
Chris, what you were talking about some of those games in the back half of the season, and Virginia Tech obviously played well, but they didn't in their wins. They weren't necessarily playing some of the better teams in the conference, and against the teams that were up towards the top of the ACC. Winning. You talk about winning the battle in the trenches, and I think every content creator in the Virginia Tech media space has, and I was talking to Dwight about this before you jumped on, but everyone has some questions about the offensive line, right? And that might be the most concerning spot of this team. Not that it's in bad shape or anything like that. They're obviously returning all of their production there. That's great experience. What does that depth look like though? Can they stay healthy? And can they improve, right? Because the better they play, the easier they make it on Kyron Drones, and then the easier that they make it to give the ball to guys like Tootin and Malachi Thomas.
They're definitely deeper this year, and I do think they'll be better. I think the question is, how much better will they be? Will they be marginally better, or will they be a lot better? If they're a lot better, then we're going to have a lot of fun this year. I think, because if the offensive line is a lot better, I don't think there's very many teams that is going to be able to stop Virginia Tech's offense. But if they're just marginally better, and then you get into that game with a good defensive front that is just really physical, like a Rutgers, or even further down the line, Clemson and Miami and teams like that, that's when you could start to struggle. So that to me is the question. Think about Tech's offensive line. I mean, if you look at it, left tackle, redshirt sophomore, left guard, redshirt freshman, center, redshirt sophomore. It is a young offensive line. Yeah. Dwight, you were part of a young offensive line at Virginia Tech at one point, and then eventually all those guys became juniors and seniors. And well, gosh, I guess it was your senior year, right? You and
Derek,
you were one of two seniors. Yeah, exactly. Yep. You and Derek Smith were the two seniors. Everybody else was young, but then those three young guys eventually became juniors and seniors, and then you had the 99 and 2000 offensive lines, which were dominant, right?
Dominant.
So this group of offensive linemen is still young. I still think this group is a year away, and probably I think they're a year away from matching the expectations of the fans, and I think they're 2 years away from reaching their peak. But I do think they'll be improved this year.
Yeah, I think when you have you got a great memory, man. Yeah, because on that was me and Derek, and the other guys were Keith Short, Tim Snecker rotating at center, and you also had Dave Cadella at the other tackle, and you had Matt Lair, who went on to play with the Dallas Cowboys and Tennessee Titans. So, yeah, and those guys were young. And that year we still went 9-3, and I think it helped that we had a mobile quarterback. But there was games where Al Clark got banged up, and there was a game when Dave Meyer came in against Pittsburgh. We won the game 17-7, ultimately because we had Keon Carpenter with a pick six, but Dave Meyer got hit so much he dislocated his shoulder, was out, and then we were down to Nick Sorensen, who was the emergency quarterback, because they were not going to burn my cousin's red shirt, even though Mike and I went to Beams and Bustle, and Beam was like, not happening, which thank God it did, because it worked out for the Hokies in that 99 and 2000. It worked out. Legendary worked out. But real quick, Chris, we only have a few minutes left, but I was asked again on the show I'm doing tomorrow morning, Big Dog Sports Radio, with it being, that this is a time of year where cramping, depth, and all that comes into play, that late August, early September, when these games are at noon and 3:00, and it feels like, you're playing behind the sun. That's how hot it gets in that equipment, and you're going live for the first time, so your adrenaline. And someone said to me, and asked me, Rick Watson on that show, the host, he said, what does Tech do to win that game? And I said, honestly, when you have a young offensive line, and even if you don't have one, when you're on the road, you want to run the ball. I said, because if you run the ball, that's the best thing for an offensive line, because it's just basically, I got to run block, take my step, pick up the mic or the linebacker or the guy in front of me, and let Tootin and those guys do their thing, Malachi and those guys, or Drones. And then all of a sudden you get a first down here, you get up a couple, scored 14-3. It makes Vanderbilt feel pressured, and then you can make them one-dimensional. If we're behind the chains and we're having to pass protect, even though we'll probably have way more Tech fans than them, you still don't want to be in those situations. So for me, I say Tech has to run the ball. I know that's corny and it's obvious, but I've seen Tech, even with Bone, even though Bone has a better feel for the offense, I've seen Tech lose games or make it harder for them to win games, even against ODU, where they just get away from the run. And I just think when they can run the ball, so Chris, what do they have to do besides that? What are your thoughts about them winning this game? What is some of the key factors they got to do to win this game this weekend?
Yeah. I mean, you're right. I mean, think back to the Marshall game last year. They ran it down Marshall's throat, first drive of the game, go up, and then they got away from the running game and ended up losing. even though I think Tootin only had 9 carries in that game. So I
Yeah.
agree. You have to run the football. And I think the type of passing game Virginia Tech has, you didn't see a successful passing game from Virginia Tech last year when they couldn't run the football, right? This is not an offense that can live on 3rd and 7s. It's just not that type of offense. So yes, the running game is going to be extremely important to Virginia Tech. Fortunately, Vandy was outside the top 100 in rush defense and pass defense last year. So unless they're drastically improved, I foresee a good day for the Virginia Tech offense. But, I agree. Run the ball, avoid big plays defensively, because I think that Vandy quarterback is good, but I don't think they have the talent around him to drive the length of the field consistently against Virginia Tech. So if you can avoid giving up big plays defensively, then I think it's going to be very tough for them to score. And don't lose the turnover battle. I don't know. God, man, you and I are so old school. Those are the most boring answers of all time, but they're 100% true. No matter what era of football,
it's not wrong with it.
No matter what decade it is, that's how you win games.
It's nothing wrong. Listen, it's nothing. I don't really have a problem with that, old school or not, because I just feel like when you're able to run the ball, like I look at the Rutgers game last year. I'm like, man, Rutgers is not that good. I know they were well coached, but I'm like, they're not doing anything special. And we had them stopped and was 4th and short. If we stopped them, I really feel like we're going to get the ball back and score. And what do? They boom, take off and they hit a long run for a touchdown, and that's ball game. When you were able to run the well, I mean, look, I know we're not, please, for those that when we run this tomorrow, understand me and listen to me well. I'm not saying we're Michigan. But I feel like Michigan last year with my guy Blake Coleman, who's a Northern Virginia guy. Sorry, Virginia Tech fans, we went to bed on that with recruitment. But either way, Michigan last year was so dominant because they ran the ball. I've tweeted numerous times with Georgia when they went back-to-back chips, they ran the ball. I've always felt like when Virginia Tech's best years when they were able to run the ball but had a dual threat quarterback that you could mix in that Brian Randall, Logan Thomas, Mike Marcus, Vick, and Tyrod, and even Gerard Evans. When you got that rhythm going, and God knows with our receivers, it's insane. It's going to be a lot of fun if things go the way they should. One last question, Chris, before you jump off. Real quick, I asked Danny this question earlier, and I definitely want to hear your picks on this. Not game picks, but teams other than Tech. In the ACC, this is a new ACC. We got SMU, Stanford, and California. California love Tupac style, right? Who else in the upper echelon, top 5, top 6 teams should we be watching this weekend and throughout the ACC to keep an eye on? We saw Georgia Tech, which didn't surprise me, do some damage to the standings already, but who else is out there?
Yeah, Georgia Tech didn't surprise me at all. I think if you look at NC State's consistency level under Dave Doran, they're always a team you have to respect as someone who's going to be in that top third of the conference. What kind of quarterback or player are they going to get from Grayson McCall? He wasn't as effective without Jamie Chadwell, who I think is a genius offensive coach, but NC State's going to put a good defense on the field down there. They got a good defensive staff and they're well coached. They might not win the league, but they'll get you 8 or 9 wins, and you'll at the end of the day you'll be like, that's a solid, well coached football team. And I think Louisville's exceptionally well coached too. Well, I think they were good enough to win the league last year, but their quarterback play wasn't dynamic enough. If they get good quarterback play this year, I think they'll be good enough everywhere else where they can challenge for the league title. And Florida State, man, they didn't leave themselves with any breathing room, after last week. I wasn't surprised by that outcome either, that Georgia Tech beat them. Georgia Tech's running game is exceptional. Those backs are really strong. Their quarterback is pretty strong and faster than he looks. I think their scheme is outstanding. A lot of eye candy and smoke and mirrors, and that's go along with talent, with good talent. I think that's an outstanding scheme. So I think the ACC is a little deeper this year, is my feeling, guys. I think it's a little bit deeper. I don't know that there's like one team that I can say, oh, that's a definite top 10 team, right? But I do think it's the quality spread out a little bit more. A lot of people are picking Miami, and I don't really blame them, but at the same time, I can't do it myself because it's Miami. They could win 10 games, or they could win 5 games.
I will never pick them.
Miami's going to do.
I will never pick them.
I hear you. Yeah. I mean, I think their quarterback is great, But
hmm
at the same time, they've had some quarterbacks before transfer in that were great, and then they started playing for Miami, and they weren't so great anymore.
And that quarterback is Gerard. I mean Gerard. I'm thinking Gerard Evans. Kyron's cousin. That's his
Yeah,
cousin. They're cousins. That's why they worked out together this summer. Him and the kid from Colorado, Dion's
Colorado.
son.
Yeah.
So and no shade to the Canes because I ride them. As far as their ability. Tech has not been the Tech of old, but that team has been so talented for decades to have one Coastal Division title when we were divisions and no ACC titles. I'm sorry, they will always get the benefit of the doubt because of the historical perspective and the recruiting they do. But I don't know, man. And you mentioned Georgia Tech, Chris. That's a team in the game. When I look at Virginia Tech, if everything starts rolling, that's a game at home that they have to win. As good as I think Georgia Tech is, and those games where Tech sleepwalking, we're going to the fourth, tied at 20. That's what when I want to get past that.
Mhm. I know,
But
absolutely.
yeah,
And Georgia Tech's awfully dangerous. Their schedule is extremely difficult this year. Now so
yeah,
I don't know what their record's going to be when they come into Lane Stadium, but they're going to be a better team than their record indicates.
yeah.
And
Well, yeah,
it's going to be an entertaining game because both quarterbacks are so similar, both running backs are so similar, the styles of play are so similar. I mean, I respect Georgia Tech. Dude, they got a middle linebacker with a neck roll like it's 1998.
yeah.
Did you
I
see that
saw,
Yeah.
game?
dude. I
Yeah.
saw it. You said 98. Listen. And those are the teams I feel like get overlooked because I was, Danny and I both have done ACC Media Day, and I think sometimes some of these talking heads get lazy and they just go with the name and they don't do the research. The reason why I was so confident picking Georgia Tech is because their quarterback had 37 touchdowns last year, and I think it's tough to start a game with an ACC conference opponent on the road in Ireland. I just feel like that's insane, but dude, this has been great, man. You always exceed expectations. And like Danny said, I've been following this guy even when I played back when we had dial-up internet. I would go to the Newman Library and look up to see what him and Will were saying about us. And I've been reading him when I used to write for Rivals. I would steal his thoughts, but I would give him credit. And Chris, keep up the great work, man. You guys are the OGs of this. Great podcast. Real quick before you jump off, because our next guest is getting ready to come in. You and Will, what do y'all have going up? Is there y'all still doing the pod this year, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. We had our game preview podcast today, and we'll do 2 per week from now on. We'll have the Monday where we recap the previous game, and then the
Okay,
preview pod will be on Wednesdays.
awesome. I got to get Will up here with
Love
you
it.
one day. That's my guy. We appreciate you, man. Thank you so much, man.
Thanks,
Enjoy the
Chris.
games
Appreciate it,
this week.
fellas.
Enjoy,
Y'all
and you
enjoy
still,
it.
yeah,
Football's
yeah,
back. Yep.
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Take
Take it
care.
easy.
See you,
Yes,
buddy.
sir.
Yep.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That is Chris Coleman of Tech Sideline. He is, as I mentioned, one of the best out there, man. He is one of those guys that Danny mentioned it, man. I go and I read his material. If you want to break down, if you guys want a breakdown of matchups, I mean, Danny, you can tell him, right? He does matchups where he O-line stats, and it's not, you don't have to be a nerd to appreciate it. I mean, I'm sitting there, I read it on my phone. I'm like, yo, I feel so knowledgeable after reading his breakdowns, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%, dude. And I always use him because he throws the stats in there. He goes position by position for the opposing team. Really gives you the down, the lowdown on whoever Tech is playing in any given week. And I also got to give a shout out though to my fraternity brother, my buddy Doug Bowman, who does a great job for 247 Sports. I actually read his preview today and he does a great job too.
Oh yeah, no doubt, no doubt. Yeah, I know
Yeah.
Doug. Great guy. Great breakdown too. Speaking of great guys and breakdowns, this guy never fails. He is my go-to. I watch him, man. Host of 757 Sports Talk. Him and Ed Young, two legends down there in the 757, my home area. I love the breakdown. We got Matt Hatfield on here, also part of VA Preps. I mean, you do everything. I mean, Matt, are you still covering? I can't remember. I don't want to mess this up. Are you still covering ODU? Or is that your ODU sports basketball or women's I can't remember. Which one is it?
No, I am. Thanks. Good to be on with you, Dwight and Danny. And by the way, I'm rocking the Vicktory Life shirt today. I'll make sure I
Oh,
give you the love there.
Yeah.
But I am
no clap.
I am the ODU women's basketball announcer. The last 3 seasons I've pitched hit for a few men's basketball games as well when Ted Alexander, the the main play-by-play guy for men's basketball and football, has football that interrupts because, as you know, the seasons overlap. But yeah, it's been fun doing that, and then doing some correspondent stuff I've done over the years. Gosh, ACC Sports Journal, Farmville Herald, Suffolk News Herald, and staying all over the place,
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, shameless plug here. Make sure for those watching and listening on Spotify and SoundCloud, please subscribe to our channel on YouTube, and also please subscribe to Chris Coleman, especially you Hokies out there. But if you love high school sports, and like I do, and I'm a VHSL guy, minus some of the old rules, I need to get a shot clock. But if you want to know the stuff, if you want to get the scoop and hear about coaches and transfers, how do we follow and get in touch with you, Matt? Because you got the 757 Sports Talk. I watch your breakdown post game on Friday nights. I'm on there like I'm on the covers watching it, man. But how can people keep up with you? Because you got a lot of things going on since you left the radio.
Sure. They can subscribe for free to YouTube. We're up there on Cova Sports TV. The great folks from the Virginia Beach Sportsplex started this a year ago, brought me and Coach Young on. We're also available on Apple, Spotify, Facebook, IG, all of the different platforms. And then with Virginia Preps, we're part of the Rivals Network powered by Yahoo Sports. Sign up today. It gives you access to our entire site, all our entire hardworking team of reporters, because it goes way beyond me, from guys like Danny Lewis in Richmond and Will Garlick, my cohort here in Tyler, to Jim McGrath up north, Robert Anderson, former Roanoke Times writer out there in the Roanoke area, Rodney Young in Southwest Virginia. We're all over the state. Robert Edmonds, I'm going to leave people out. I don't mean to. And it gives you access to all the recruiting news as well across the network. So do that. You can pay a little if you want for that. Get the free stuff on YouTube and get your sports fix, be it local, high school, college, you name it.
No doubt, man. So, Matt, I brought you on. I told Danny we're going to have you on. He was like, yeah, just like last year, you did a great football preview, because everything starts tomorrow. From the 757 to Roanoke to the 804 to the 703, the little spots near Dinwiddie. But before we talk high school football, Division 3, 4, 5, and 6, let's talk a little bit about in-state schools and football. Virginia is so funny, man. I remember, I'm old now. I'm an OG. I remember when it was just Tech, UVA, William and Mary, and a few other schools. Now you got Roanoke College, you got Liberty, you got ODU, you got William and Mary, you got JMU, who was at Division I AA. Now they're one of the best programs in the state. Obviously, Tech and UVA are still there. You know, just let's talk about a few schools, man. Obviously, we're both Hokies. Dan and I played there. We're both alumni. But before we talk about Tech and UVA, tell us a little bit about ODU's football program at JMU. ODU went to a bowl game last year, had a tough loss to start the season with Virginia Tech, but then they actually went to a bowl game. My daughter goes there, so she's friends with a lot of football players, and she was telling me, like, Dad, we lost a lot of transfers, but we brought a lot of transfers in. What's going on with ODU? How are they looking this year?
You know, they played the most one-score games. We actually had on our show last week, you're good friends now with David Teal. We talked about it, the most one-score games of anybody in the country. So they were in a bunch of roller coaster games. It's a brand new roster. You know, you lose a player to Duke. It's a wide receiver from the local area. You bring in a running back from Northern Virginia, who played for the Hokies, by the way, Bryce Duke. So they brought in different pieces. Yeah. Grant Wilson at quarterback gives them some continuity there. I got a chance to MC on the field. They did a spring game, and I was on the field getting a chance to watch them position by position, sort of the unit breakdowns. And I feel like they have better depth across the ball. It's not just coach speak. To me, it's going to come down to up front. Remember, they had Wake Forest on the ropes, and late in that game, the pass pro broke down. They couldn't block them. So, and you guys know this better than anybody. When you go from the Power 5 level to these schools in the Sun Belt, the MAC, CUSA, there's a drop off of one or two of your key linemen goes down, or you lose a corner, it can be city for a whole stretch of a ball game. It's how you see these comebacks now. You've seen some even the first week of the season where you see SMU struggling with Nevada, or you see a Georgia Tech upset of Florida State. If you're weak in a spot and a team can exploit it, now you're in a tight situation. So I feel like they're showing progress, but it could be like in a different way than, say, like, and Teal and I talked about this with UVA. UVA might be a better football team than last year, but the record might not indicate it. I think ODU could be a better team. I'm not sure they're going bowling, because that schedule is brutal with South Carolina and Virginia Tech and who they play on the front end. James Madison, I'm amazed by them guys, because they seem to reload and not rebuild. They've changed coaches again. Bob Chesney coming in from Holy Cross after Kurt Signetti left for Cincinnati. And it reminds me back in Mickey Matthews won a championship years ago, didn't miss a beat. You think back to Mike Houston a couple years ago. Mike Houston was the flavor of the month.
Yeah.
East Carolina, and people forget, oh, yeah, he was here. He got us a championship. And so when they lose coaches, I think they just have such a strong, to me with JMU, and having gone to JMU and spoke with some of the people in the athletic department, broadcasters. My dad's an alum of JMU from the 70s. They have such a strong infrastructure and the foundation, the athletic department, they really have done a great job of replenishing what they lose, the right coaches, the right hires. I just, and to make that jump the way they did and do it as successfully, as quickly as they did, kudos to them. And they've gotten some real good diamonds in the rough, just even in recruiting. I think to a few linebackers in our backyard in the 757, a TJ Jones, Taurus Jones from Norcom. He could have gone higher. Dimitri Holloway from Heritage High in Newport News. He could have gone higher and didn't. So they've gotten the right 2 or 3 steals that some of the bigger boys, Power 5 schools didn't take, and it's paid dividends for them.
Yeah, I agree with that about JMU. They actually do a great job of getting those guys that Tech can't get or maybe sleeps on offering. Danny, you want to say something? Were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to jump in. I think at some point we got to talk about Liberty too. But Matt, how about another team in the 757? How about Norfolk State?
I was going to say that. You took
yeah,
go ahead.
They were they lost a real tight game last week, and that was one of the week 0 games that we got to watch. But that's a consistently solid program as well down there.
Yeah, and getting that exposure, it's invaluable to them to be, in that HBCU showcase, be on ABC on a Saturday night. I know it's week 0 before the mega matchups when you got your Georgias and your Clemsons and you got your Miami versus your Florida. But that type of exposure, people that aren't familiar with NSU and the Spartans and the whole green and gold, behold the green and gold mantra that they've got. And they've gotten a few players. They haven't gotten as many, and they're still building, but I feel like it's there. We watch them in basketball. Robert Jones is at a team either in the NCAA tournament or right there on the cusp year after year after year. So it's coming. No doubt it's coming. And then just to follow up what you said, Danny, Liberty's made some noise. They've been a program that if last year we had the playoff, they'd have been in the playoff playing in Oregon or a Florida State or somebody. And then William and Mary, former UVA coach Mike London, starting to get more and more in-state players, recruits. It's a lot harder at William and Mary to do, what he did at Richmond, where he won a national championship at the 1AA level or FCS level. But I'm looking at just this 2024 class and the 2025 class coming up. Beware, folks. They're starting to do and get closer to what JMU used to do in 1AA. I don't know if it'll pay off in a national championship per se, but I like the direction they're going. It's taken some time. It does, Rome wasn't built in a day, but they're getting there. And I like some of the players they're picking up. And they're not losing, at the FCS level. You don't have to worry about as much, say, like ODU and JMU and Liberty about the portal coming and taking as many of your guys, perhaps.
Well, I want to end it before we talk high school football because I cannot wait to break down high school football with you. You did a great job last year. You do a great job on your show. I watch it live. You and Ed are hilarious. You guys are like those 2 guys on the Muppets, the OGs that sit in the booth and roast people, and then you roast each other. But you guys are so insightful. Ed is a great storyteller.
Not
man.
Bert and Ernie. You're not talking about Bert and Ernie, right?
No, not Bert and Ernie. The 2 old, the 2 old guys. No, not Bert and Ernie. No.
I know you're talking about.
No. But on a serious note, when you look at UVA, people troll me sometimes because Tech has, and I didn't get a chance to get my UVA guys on here, but I will. Hopefully I can get a mod on next episode. But they like, wow, you guys went 2-2 against UVA. I said, contrary to what you guys see now over the last 20 plus years, when I was at Tech, we were both ranked top 15, top 25, and we had most of the in-state players with Anthony Poindexter and everybody like that. And now it's been, hit or miss with UVA. And I don't know Tony Elliott well. I knew he was the OC at Clemson. I think they've done well recruiting, but what do you make of UVA and what they have to do to kind of get back to where their fans expect them to do, not just with recruiting, but is it quarterback play? Is it retaining players? I know when they lost Bronco, the entire offensive line left and went to the portal. That was huge. And then they lost, to me, a great quarterback. I forgot the kid's name that went to BYU or wherever I forgot where he went. Did he go to BYU? No, he left and went to the other school. I forgot the quarterback. Guys, help me out. What's his name? I'm so bad with this. He was the quarterback that left when Bronco left.
Talking about Brendan Armstrong that left to go to NC State.
Thank you, Brendan Armstrong. BYU was where
lefty.
BYU is where Bronco came from. But when you look at UVA, what'd you say that? What'd you say?
That he didn't do as hot when he left too. He didn't do as hot. He wasn't.
So they've had that coaching carousel. You mentioned Mike London, who at the time was killing the recruiting guy. Smoke Mizell. You got Andrew Brown, who was a national Gatorade Player of the Year as a defensive lineman out of Oscar Smith. and he also got the great safety, and other great
Quinn
recruits.
Blanding.
Quinn Blanding.
Yeah.
But how did they get back? It's not about just beating Tech, but how did they get mentioned, and get back to that expectation level where they have like that one good season and they kind of drop off a little bit?
It's a great question, Dwight. And I would tell you the biggest thing, and this is not to be diminishing the program or knocking them in. And Tony Elliott came last year to the Virginia Beach Sports Club. I was down there and got a chance to interview him and meet him face to face. Really personable guy, likable, charismatic guy. I think he got put. It's almost like when Ricky Ronnie took over at Old Dominion coming in from Penn State during COVID. They didn't have a season. The pandemic hit them. When that tragedy struck and those players, lost their lives, and we still think about that tragedy and the end of that season that they didn't even have a Hokies Who's matchup that year.
Right.
I think it put them behind. It's one of those things that it takes you so long to mentally recover, emotionally recover, just get to where you want to be. I think they're still trying to forge an identity. So, Mike, to answer your question, I almost pose a question. What are they and who are they? What type of brand of football do they play? What's their style? Do they have an MO, an identity? And I think for recruits, be it in the 757, the 804, Nova, wherever it is, you have to figure out, why am I going to UVA? Mike London got those 5-star, 4-star guys you're talking about, like the Eli Harolds, the Smoke Mizels, the Andrew Browns, the Quinn Blandings. They didn't have the quarterback play, and they were not a top 25 team like their recruiting class would dictate they could and should be. So quarterback position, it solves a lot of ills. When we're talking about ACC, talking about the lower level, beyond the group of 5, Power 5, that is going to solve a lot of things. So, Anthony Calandria just got named the starter. We'll see if that can help them make some progress. But they haven't, and they've got guys on their staff. Chris Slade, you remember Chris Slade, Dwight?
Yes.
He was a heck of a player, footballer.
Legend.
They've got guys on their staff. Yeah, absolutely. That can connect in parts in Tidewater, in Richmond, all across the state to get those players home. It's just going to take a little longer, I think, and I hope they give Coach Elliott enough time, because it's not going to be done overnight. And look, the ACC is a different landscape now. You're bringing SMU and Stanford and Cal. They're not at that level where we can talk about them even making the leap that, say, the Hokies could make, or an NC State or a UNC can make. So quarterback play can help it a lot, but really they got to bottom line, they got to get to recruits and coaches and people around the state. What are they? What's their brand of football? The Hokies, you guys had that for years, the lunch pail, the specialty. You had an identity. I don't know that UVA has that yet, and they're building towards that.
Yeah. And then, with the Hokies, one thing that's really stood out this past summer and spring is Brent Pry, when he came back and returned to Virginia Tech as the head coach, he said he wanted to win the state. And this is a state, especially down there where you're at and where I'm from. Virginia used to be the 757 as far as in everyone else. Now it's the 757, which is still a recruiting rich area, but you also have Nova, who's got athletes now and always had athletes, but taking football really seriously with Freedom and Woodbridge, and now those guys at Hayfield, and you got Richmond with Ryan and Highland Springs and Thomas Dale, and then in Southwest Virginia, you got some teams up there and some athletes. And this summer, Fontel Mons, Pearson Prelo, J.C. Price, and Brent Pry have really been doing a great job putting an emphasis on getting guys from Green Run in the 757, kind of like that old field back when I had hair, when I was part of the Hampton High Crappers, when Coach Hyde and Beamer and Kavanaugh and Steinspring were coming down there. Virginia Tech is in year 3, a lot of expectations, but they got to win and prove expectations to be true. But I feel like Pry's on the right track with getting fans and alumni to believe in his vision. And you mentioned identity. I think before you came on, I told Danny, I feel like that's the biggest difference to me, is that I feel like we have an identity now. Where, after Beamer left, we were kind of in disarray. But you're in this media business, man. What are you seeing with the Hokies this year, and not just with the recruiting, but your feel on Pry and his staff?
Well, you hit it on the head there, Dwight. A pipeline is a big deal. When UVA got those guys, they had the pipeline with Bayside High School, those 757 guys. They've got a pipeline with Green Run, getting a Keelan Brody Adams, who was a record-setting receiver. They've got his teammate, Jane Anderson, committed, Zeke Chinwiki, the edge rusher. And we've talked about this before. In the last few years of the cycles, whatever recruiting service you subscribe to, be it with us at Rivals and Virginia Preps, or you name it, all your top 15, top 20 prospects in the state, there were so many of them going out of state to North Carolina, which had the connection with Dre Bly, or Duke, which had the connection with Zon Burden, or Pittsburgh, which had the connection with Chris Beatty, who was a coach at Lansdowne, Coach Percy Harvin in high school. And now there's a couple of guys going to Maryland. All right, the Terps out of the Big Ten used to be an ACC. They got some guys like Messiah Delome, Carlton Smith, the linebacker from Maury, but fewer of those guys. It's not going from 4 to 6 to 8 of those guys. It's just 2 or 3 of them big name guys. Yeah, you're getting a couple of them that you say, all right, wanted to get Jillian Gilchrist, wanted to get this guy, but they're getting enough guys that, okay, you feel like you're getting back to the 757 best guys. If they're not going to those big boys, the Georgias, the Ohio States, the Michigans, Virginia Tech's the next option for them if they're an upper crust 4-star guy or in that 10 to 25 range in the state. So I think they've just been hammering home their message that making that progress into the year. And again, we talked about like quarterback with UVA. You started to see some signs last year. Kyron Jones, Hokies turned the end of the season. Now you're seeing people on these graphics putting them in these college football playoffs potentially. You're hearing them about as a sleeper to win the conference. And they're getting into the buildings. They're getting in with the coaches. And now they know who Brent Pry and some of these people on the staff are. So it's their process got a little more accelerated, I think, than UVA's. Tragedy was awful for them. And I feel like Tech is close. They're really close. This is a really pivotal year for them. If they can get to pay off, I think you'll see an even bigger splash in recruiting next year. And there's some guys in 2026 that could really make an impact as much as 25, if not more so.
No doubt, man. And that's a good transition to high school, and we can just work our way up to Division Six. You mentioned, the 2026 and 2025 classes. We're on that now. I can't believe I'm saying that, 2025 and 2026. But last year we saw some really good powerhouse football teams. A lot of people really hate the fact that the VHSL is different from back in the day with the AAA, AA, single A. But I've always told people, like my good friend Julian Brown, who runs Nova Legends podcast, and other people in the podcast community that cover high school sports, despite the new classifications in football and basketball, they typically get it right with the divisions and the state championship contenders. Last year you saw Maury and Stonebridge. Maury took care of business, had that big win over Highland Springs. And then they had a big win over Stonebridge, although Stonebridge made it interested in that late in the second half. You saw that great matchup with Highland Springs and Freedom. Everybody waited for you. You previewed that and talked about it on this very podcast and on your 757 Sports Talk show about that was a matchup they saw. You even saw VHSL reclassify the pairing so that could happen. They can say they didn't, but it happened. And, that was a great game. Freedom won 42-34. So you had a lot of great powerhouse teams last year. Unfortunately, we couldn't see them match up with each other. But let's talk about Division III. Who's in Division III? Who are the contenders across the state, and who should we keep an eye on this year?
Sure. So you start with the defending champs, and that's Liberty Christian with perhaps the best prospect in the entire state of 2025. He's a 4-star. He's going to Clemson, and Gideon Davidson, who was the state player of the year. He runs like a locomotive. He's an absolute beast. And by the way, his teammate who blocks for him helps open up holes. Offensive tackle who's 6'5", 285, Easton Ware, is committed to Clemson as well. So you start with them. They're the only private school in the VHSL. There could be a second, as I understand. Smith Mountain Lake on the southwestern portion of the state is hoping to get that finalized in the next couple of years to be in the VHSL as a small school, Class 1, likely Dogwood District member. But they don't have maybe the depth, and they do, they can get players that are able to come in, but they don't have the depth of some of the bigger schools. But they played Salem early in the year, beat them with Peyton Lewis and Chris Cole, and they look really good. They have to answer the quarterback position, and if they have enough depth defensively to be very stout again. But you start with them. Magna Vista is a team to watch out for, guys. They got a lot of speed. They've won a couple of state titles before. Joe Favero is a good coach. Thomas Jefferson of Richmond, keep an eye on them. They're on the rise.
I heard
Turner
about
Ashby. Yeah, keep an eye on Turner Ashby. They're in that same region with Liberty Christian and those rugged Seminole District teams like Heritage of Lynchburg, but they've had a couple of nice runs here, and they've got a great tandem with Micah Matthews and Bew Baylor. Matthews, the Virginia Tech football and baseball commit, dual sport athlete. Kettle runs pretty good. Lafayette from the 757, they lost to Liberty Christian. They got a young sophomore quarterback who's going to be mighty good. And then there's a bunch of teams on the radar below that, but Class 3, it doesn't have as many heavyweights. I think once you get past LCA as the prohibited favorite, there's a bunch of teams that could be moving up and down on the pecking order and can make a little run to reach in the championship weekend. William Byrd was a team last year did that. Christiansburg was a team a couple years ago. So teams that'll be in the mix. I don't know that there's a team that has the upside of Liberty Christian, though, because Davidson is just a game changer by himself.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about him. It's crazy, man. Magna Vista, I haven't heard that name in years. They were a power back in the day, am I right? I remember seeing them all over the place, man, when I was playing
They were
back in the
good. They
day.
they won a couple of state titles back to back, and they got a lot of speed. Their quarterback's coming back, and Coach Favero does a really good job. They lost last year in the playoffs to William Byrd in the region championship, but they were undefeated before that. Simeon Moore's a kid. Remember that name? He's a 2026 quarterback who's going to put up some gaudy stats. You'll be hearing about him on Friday nights and Saturdays after games. And then they have some good receivers, Torian Younger. They got some guys that are going to be real hard to deal with. So that they can put up some points and be a fun, exciting group to watch.
Yeah, man. See, Danny, I told you this is why I love Matt having Matt on because
I know.
I can't get all across VA and get this, man. So that's why, ladies and gentlemen, when we run this, please watch his show if you love high school sports. And it's not just football. He goes especially basketball. That's my favorite sport. Surprisingly, it is. Let's talk Division 4. I think Division 4 is loaded with contenders. But again, I'm not Matt Hatfield, but I feel that way. So last year, I believe Phoebus won it. They won it on a Hail Mary. Was it against Salem? Right? Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
by a freshman quarterback, 86
yeah,
yards on the last, with 1 second to go in the game, basically the last play.
yeah. So everyone's saying Phoebus is going to run the Peninsula District again, and you have, I believe, Verina out of the 804. They're in 4, right? Division 4, and I feel like Verina is going to be right there. Some people feel like they're going to challenge Highland Springs this year. That's a big rivalry game. But then again, let's hear Matt's breakdown. Who are the contenders in Division 4?
So the best region in the state, there's 6 classifications, 4 region per classification. So you do the math 6 times 4, 24 regions. The best region in the state, in my opinion, is Region 4B. That's the Richmondish pod for Class 4, where you have Verina, which has a great defense. They've won a state title in the last 3-4 years. Jay Sean Richardson, a junior defensive tackle, is a big-time player. Damari Carter, great wide receiver, defensive back. He'll probably have about 1,500 yards receiving. Quarterback Caleb Weiss, who is the younger brother of the basketball point guard KJ Weiss that helped them win a state championship 2 years ago. He's back. He threw the go-ahead touchdown pass and had 3 TDs in that Highland Springs battle last year. They lost close. They're good. But Dwight, as good as Verina is, they could either win it and play Phoebus in the States and possibly win the whole thing, or they could lose in the first round. You say, because that region's got Dinwiddie with Harry Dalton, the Southern Cal Committee. They're good. Billy Mills' team, they'll screen to death. They'll run some stuff. They can put you in single. They can do so many different things offensively. They're fun to watch. Huguenot has amassed a lot of talent. They got some players. Mark L. Dabney's going to be one of the best linebackers in the state this year. And then even Eastern View with Virginia Tech commit Brett Clatterball at linebacker. They go 9-1, 10-0 just about every year regular season. Powhatan's on the come up with Matt Henderson, a Penn State commit. My colleague Danny Lewis thinks they could win 7-8 ball games and be a real threat. And they played a close first-round playoff game a year ago. That region is loaded. Salem will be good. They don't have Peyton Lewis and Chris Coleman anymore, who are All-Americans at Tennessee and Georgia, respectively, in the SEC. But I don't count them out. They got Josiah Persinger, a JMU commit, and they do what they do at Salem. It's almost like the old school days of Phoebus and Hampton to a degree. But I think Phoebus is still the team to beat. They don't have the elite level prospects like a Jordan Bass who's going to Pittsburgh, but that quarterback is returning. He'll be a sophomore, Maricus Banks. They got Noah Jefferson, a safety receiver, going to Delaware. They got Marcus Hops, a lineman, going to Howard, who's just a linchpin for them. And Najee Gay, a defensive back, going to NC Central. They got a running back who's undersized. They call him the Bull. Davion Roberts, 29 touchdowns last year. And their schedule, one thing I'll hit on, guys, as we close up Class 4 is what I like about it's almost like college football now. Back in the days when you played Dwight, it used to be 4 teams win the playoffs. You go 8-2, 9-1, miss the playoffs. Now you take 8. Some hate that because you get some 2-8 teams. Yeah, and I don't like that. I think 6 is the right number, like the NFL does or used to do. Give the top 2 seeds buys and away you go. So you don't get some teams under 500 in the playoffs. But nonetheless, you have teams scheduling these incredible games out of the chute. I mean, Phoebus's first couple of games, they got Highland Springs out of the gate. Dinwiddie's going to play Maury. Maury's got Wise. They've got, in addition to them, they play Highland Springs and Dinwiddie. You have all these 2 or 3 games out of the gate every week for these teams that are elite level. I mean, I'm looking at even the smaller levels. You got teams like Galax and Glenver and Graham and these teams playing that are, in my top of my rankings. So right out of the gate, the rankings get blown up to smithereens because you're going to have teams that could be 0-3. I mean, just in Class 1, for example, Galax started out 1-4 in the state championship run, and they went on and got hot end of the year. So you have teams that can be under 500 2-3 games in. Years ago, you're out. Now, if you're a Phoebus or a Dinwiddie or a Verina who plays Indian River out of the gate, a defending region champion. You lose that game early, it's not the end of the world. You can still recover from it. So it's a little bit like college football, where the regular season, these results, people are so amped up for these early season games, then the season will hit a lull. But it's not the worst thing if you lose them, because you still have time to recover, get a good seed, or make a run once you get in the whole tournament, the whole big dance. So
Yeah, that's really good. Really quick question before we get into 5 and 6. The Peninsula District, my home, my district, you mentioned Phoebus. I believe, and again, I don't know how accurate this is, but somebody told me on one of those crazy Facebook pages that Phoebus has not lost a district game since 2016. I don't know how accurate that is. I hope, again, I'm not hating. They're our rival and our nemesis, but I respect Coach Blunt and what they've done. But it just seems so weird because I remember it was us and them. That kind of became the rivalry because Hampton and Bethel were no longer the rivalry. Kickingham always threw themselves in the mix, but it was always Hampton and Phoebus when I was playing at Virginia Tech with Womack versus Ronald Curry and all those great matchups. And, you had Biscuit and those guys, Marcus Higgins, and, you had Tyrod Taylor versus Taj Boyd. But now it's like Phoebus. I know Messiah is out for the year, right? The great running back that's going to Maryland from Warwick High School.
he is.
So
leg injury.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but God bless him. He's got a scholarship. But can Warwick make it interesting? Last year they had that crazy game, but Phoebus was in control most of the game. And I mean, can anybody dethrone the Phoebus Phantoms in the Peninsula District? Or is it just
I would tell you no. I would tell you no without a healthy Deloma. That's not knocking what Warwick has done and what Corey Harrison's done, but they only scored 2 points last year. It was a 10-2 loss, and they haven't beaten Phoebus since 2001 when a guy named Vick was playing quarterback. I don't think it was Mickle, though. I think it was Marcus.
It's Marcus.
Yeah, you got to go back to 2001 to find the last time they'd beaten them. These kids were not born back then. So, yeah, anything can happen. But they had trouble scoring even with Delome against Phoebus's defense. I don't know how they do it. Now, they have a good receiving core, but Phoebus's defense, from what I saw in the benefit game last week with Maury, that's, again, you got teams doing benefit games that are defending state champs 3 times. I love this. You're doing it all across the state. Tidewater, Nova. People are putting the Eagles aside, getting that competition early on to get their teams ready and prepped. Madison, Stonebridge coming up, game 1 for the 3rd year in a row.
Tomorrow.
But, yeah, I just don't feel like Warwick has enough offense unless Phoebus makes miscues and gives Warwick short field. So, and Hampton's not at that level yet. The rest of the PD, it's in a weird way, Dwight, it was the best district in the state by far.
For decades. For
hands down.
decades.
And now it's not even the best. I'm going to make PD people mad. I'm sorry. It's not the best district in the 7x7. It's just not. So
no, I'll say it for you. I've been saying it.
Yeah, they get in the playoffs, and they probably haven't been tested since game 1 of Highland Springs. So you have to wonder if you can jump on them early, which I said last year was going to be the whole key for King George with those 2 flashy receivers, Mackay White and Chance Wiggins, both graduated. If they could jump on them early, you're in good shape. They actually kind of did, and then Phoebus fought back. They didn't jump on them enough, and they won a close ball game. So, yeah, it's hard to see it right now because the PD's not as strong, and Warwick's got a dilemma. Not only do you deal with Phoebus in Class 4, but in your own region, you got Maury, the big dog, and Kings Fork, and some other teams on the rise. So it's a hard region to get out of.
Yeah. By the way, those listening and watching, keep an eye out for this name. Matt, you shouted him out already. You had his coach on, Coach Porter, but Derek Fisher is my nephew, starting quarterback for Bethel. Started as a freshman, safety and receiver. Already getting some interest from some D1 schools, and he's got that Vick blood in him. So just keep an eye. He's a quarterback. I know Bethel's still kind of trying to get back to those Iverson days, but I think Coach Porter is a great guy, great coach. And I hear my Hampton Crabbers are getting better with Coach Woodrow there, but we got a long way to go to get back to those dynasty years. That was legendary. But with that being said, speaking of dynasty, Maury in Division 5, to me, is a class of Division 5. I mean, they ran through everybody last year. I mean, there was games I would blink and go get some popcorn, and they were already up 60 points, running clock in the second quarter. They got great skilled personnel. The big matchup last year was them in Highland Springs. After Highland Springs went down to Miami, Lauren Johnson's home state, and they won. And they had that big win over Manchester. And then they played Maury, and Maury came out the gate, jumped on them 14-0, and never looked back that entire season. Maury won the state championship last year against Stonebridge. I feel like it's the usual suspects in 5. You have Stonebridge, even though they don't have Coach Mickey anymore. Who else joins Maury in that fight? I heard someone text me yesterday and say, it's Maury until somebody dethrones them this year, but is there anybody that can?
It is more until somebody dethrones them, because they have a linebacker going to Maryland and Carlton Smith, a safety going to South Carolina and Kendall Daniels. They have a wide receiver going to Indiana and LeBron Bond, and an edge rusher going to Clemson and Ari Watford. And that doesn't include two guys with great nicknames in Speedy Cannon going to William Mary and Fat Man Clark going to William Mary. And by the way, their state player here is the quarterback, Autori Newkirk, and he's like the 10th or 11th most recruited guy on the team, and he just throws for 4,000 plus yards. But they looked as good as ever in the benefit game. That being said, there are some teams you outlined, Stonebridge being one. New coach, it might take some time. Watch out for Briar Woods. I've already put on our bold
Really?
top 10. Briar Woods ahead of them for this year, because I think with Coach Golston coming in, some new staff members, new quarterback, because their main quarterback transferred to John Champ, they could play each other twice. It could be like the old days. Danny remembers this in Nova, where you had Centerville, Westville would play 2-3 times. It would be like you played, so one could win the first, the other one could win the rematch. They could play twice, and the other team win the second meeting. And Briar Woods with Trey Dudley going to JMU, Brady Carmichael going to Navy. Mike Burnett's a heck of a coach. The guy's been a state championship at Tuscarora and Broad Run.
Yep.
Keep an eye out on them. I would have put them even higher in my top 10 if I was better convinced about their line play. They got two freshmen they love, but they're playing some kids that are a little, green on the offensive line. Matoka and Green Run have almost as much talent as Maury in terms of the upper crust marquee prospects. I mean, Dylan Newton-Short, we talked about UVA earlier. He's one of the best receivers in the state, hands down. He's a steal for UVA. Montino Williams, Bryce Yates, who's going to Pittsburgh, Caleb Williams going to South Carolina. Now, quarterback is a little bit of a question mark, because they've toyed with playing Yates, the receiver, the pick commit at quarterback. They also got a kid in from Hermitage. So that could determine how good Matoka really is. LC Bird's getting better. They brought back guys from that state championship staff during the 3-time title years with David Bedwell. Keep an eye on them in that region. Keep an eye on William Fleming making some noise. Green Run's got, as I mentioned, studs with Anderson going to Tech and Chinwiki, Knowledge Harrell as well. Emmanuel Taylor going to Pittsburgh, and Kassan Farrar, their quarterback, going to UConn. At the end of the day, all these teams could battle royale to be, I think, between 2 and 10 in my top 10s, because Maury's just, they're light years above everybody. Think about this. Their closest district game was 74-19 with Lake Taylor, who's not a scrub team, who's won 3 state titles with a legendary coach. We did our coach rankings the other day, Dwight, and Coach Young had Hank Sawyer number 1 on his list, and I can argue it. They beat him 74-19. That was their closest district game, and they beat Warwick 48-20, and it really wasn't that close. So if Maury does what they're supposed to and they don't get complacent and they stay laser-focused, they have a chance to be historic like last year's team was, statistically speaking, and it's going to take someone playing at a high level and then playing below their level to beat them.
Yeah, man, we were robbed of a possible super tournament with Highland Springs, Maury, Freedom of Woodbridge, Stonebridge, and a few other schools, because I thought last year was legendary as far as the scores and the talent and the D1 and D2 recruits across the state with those state championship teams. So now we're in Division 6, probably the division I'm most familiar with, being a Nova guy now, living up here. Lot of contenders. A lot of contenders. You have Thomasdale, Manchester, Highland Springs. The big story this year in the summer, I know you know about it, Matt, was the whole Hayfield investigation, which felt like something like a Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton type episode. It was insane. Fairfax Time articles.
Reality TV show, right? Yeah.
It was
TV,
every week I'm on these pages and people are sharing and arguing. Daryl Overton, a guy I have a lot of love and respect for. He's been on my show a few times, and the guy I know personally, his nephew is a dynamic running back, Jeffrey Overton Jr. I'm biased, but he's great. If you don't like Tech, he's going to Tech, and he was a Gatorade Player of the Year, State Gatorade Player of the Year. But you have a lot of teams.
Reggie
you have Madison, Reggie Bushlight. Yes, trust me. You probably saw my video, Danny, when I went crazy and went live and talked about we're up. Because I love Jeffrey Overton Jr. But Hayfield now has Daryl Overton and his younger brother Jeffrey Overton, and a great staff, 2-time defending state champions, Hayfield. But again, Division 6 is like
Freedom was.
I'm sorry, I gotta get the orange and black and get from the black and gold. But Hayfield has that staff and some of that personnel. And then you have Manchester and some other schools in 804. So who are some of the teams in Division 6 we should keep an eye on?
Well, just on Hayfield for a second, what you did is what's going to be key to them, Dwight, because a lot of people are going to think, how do they mesh the guys that are Hayfield kids and the ones that have come in from Freedom coexist and get, because I spoke with Coach Overton the other day as we're putting up their preview coming up. I think the big question for them is, they have as much talent. If you were to rank these teams, all the classifications, the two most talented rosters in the state are Hayfield and Maury. Now the matter is those kids haven't won before as Hayfield Hawks. They've won as another team. So what's the buy-in? How do you deal with adversity? Block out the outside noise, harness it and use it to your advantage, because either you love them or hate them. It feels like there's no in between with the people that are liking, the Hayfield Hawks and what Overton and his staff and those people are doing, and the people that are basically the detractors and feel that, they're doing something wrong here. Bottom line is they're really, really good, and I think they have an opportunity to win it. I don't know if there's another team that is as built for the quick strike to beat them. Now, Highland Springs, Lauren Johnson's one heck of a coach, and he can devise a defense that can slow the game down a little bit. He did that in the second half of the championship game. Got a new quarterback who's going to Army, and Nelson Lane. Still got his son, Brennan Peanut Johnson, back at linebacker, who's mighty good. And I feel like they will have had some tough battles. Will Hayfield have as many of them? How will they handle adversity? Thomas Dale's good, but they graduated some guys outside of their big-time stud in Shamari Earls, who is a defensive back that flipped from South Carolina to Georgia. They were 10-0 last year. Quarterback got hurt, so they got to stay healthy. Manchester's undergoing a new coaching change, so that could take some time for them. And then Oscar Smith is a team. We remember them winning championships. What's going on with them? This might be the year they're back on the map in the state, because they have a wide receiver that's special, Travis Johnson. I think he's as good a receiver as that's come out of that program. They've had a bunch of great ones. Some that have gone and played for the Hokies, one played for the Who's. They've had a bunch of receivers over the years, from Rich Morgan to Bill D, the late great Bill D, and now under Coach Chris Scott. So Lonnie Andrews, the third, getting the football is really good. Their defensive front should be better, and I think they're building towards a state championship level run, if not this year, by next year. So a bunch of teams out there that are, to me, guys, Class 6 was the hardest to handicap as far as who's going to win it. But there's, this, Dwight, that Prince William area is getting better. There's some teams.
I was getting ready. I was going to ask you about Battlefield and Patriot and Gainesville. Gainesville got the kid Colvin Smith, the running back that's got the Syracuse offer, and they got a quarterback who I think is dynamic. Gainesville, I'm referring to. Battlefield returns a lot of starters.
They're fighting for respect with the 757, the 804, and the Nova, which have traditionally won the championships. You got to go back to Battlefield's. The only team in that area that's won a championship in six, in relative time, and the Cedar Run, if you will, was Battlefield back in 2010. And they got some guys. Yeah, there you go. And they remember they beat Hermitage, who beat Bayside, who beat Oscar Smith. So it was almost like the domino effect of Bayside beat Smith. That was their Super Bowl. Hermitage took down the team that took down Smith and Bayside. That was Super Bowl. And then Battlefield came through and beat them in the championship. So
I remember that.
You were to tell me this state championship Saturday, everybody's saying it's going to be Oscar Smith or Thomas Dale or Highland Springs or Hayfield or Lake Braddock in South County, teams that are, been good region championships. South County won a state title back in 19. And then out of nowhere comes whoever comes out of that Cedar Run, because they're playing some good football there and getting better. It wouldn't stun me. I like Battlefield's team the most in terms of the upside. I know Patriots got Jackson McCarter, who's a really good running back going to Villanova, and Gainesville is Gainesville with Coven is the new, and Coach Bruton there, the new on the rise team you got to watch out for, because they could be quietly 5-0, 6-0. We say, where'd they come out of? And they're a team that just missed my top 10 that I like a whole lot. But Battlefield, with that senior leadership of Cole Woodson going to Pitt, Cameron Binkowski, who's going to Army, 20+ sacks last year. I feel like, Coach Hatfield there, they've been on the cusp of it. Freedom's out of their region now as far as being a threat to win it. Those kids now at Hayfield, they've had the 3 straight unbeaten regular seasons. I'm curious to see how they take that next step. And they're the intriguing team to me. I put them at 5 in my top 10, but the teams ahead of them, I don't think there's that big of a gap. I think they've closed the gap, and I think that area, those teams have closed the gap. So Class 6 could be fascinating. It's not a foregone conclusion to me who wins it, like I would say we think it is with 5, 4, maybe 3.
It's really cool, man, just talking this with you, because Thursday when we run this, Danny, you'll do the audio for Spotify tomorrow, but I'll run this tonight. But when people see this on Thursday, they'll get their Matt Hatfield fix as these games get played tomorrow night on Thursday when this is being aired. I really appreciate you jumping on. I cannot wait, man. This is the best time of the year as we transition into summer, into fall, with all these football teams and matchups with college and high school football. And then right around the time it gets going, then you got my other favorite sport, basketball. You mentioned rankings. How do fans that love high school football like me see these rankings, these top 10? Is that on the 757 Sports Talk, or is that on Virginia Prep rivals? How is that? Where's that at?
Good question. So if you go on our front page right now, you'll see a smattering of previews all up and down the site for subscribers. We'll have it. We'll have a big plate of it where it's just you click it. You can click the team links for all the top tens before the games kick off on Thursday. So it'll be up there, and we'll update the rankings each week for the front page. It's free to see. The rankings are free to see. The team previews, you got to pay to see those. But we'll also have it on our ticker on our podcast on 757 Saturday Sports Talk on Cova Sports TV with Coach Young and me. But it'll be available in a lot of places. You can see that. So it'll change. It's very fluid. I'm waiting for the first couple of upsets to make me look like a fool for having, and someone yelling at me, why'd you have them third and number 9? They beat them by 3 touchdowns. It happens every year. But
Every year.
I will say last year we did have the 6, 5, and 4. All of them won at championships, and then the teams that won it none of them were ranked any lower than 6. I think Galax was the lowest at 6. Who was 6 and 4 at one point and made this magical run to the state championship in Class 1. So it'll be a lot of fun. I mean, I think we're gonna have some compelling games early, some photo finishes, as they say, and some neat storylines. And the other cool thing too is when we uncover new names. You know this in your backyard, Dwight. The PD's got some young quarterbacks, sophomores that are really good, and there's always some new teams and storylines that we find throughout the year. So I'm juiced up for it as ever, and should be a fun one.
It's always fun when you join us, man. We appreciate you, Matt, for jumping on, man. And yeah, tell Ed he's a great storyteller. I think he's hilarious, man. And real quick, because we definitely got to go up against it. But you have your do you still do the post game live on your Instagram? I love that. It'll be like
We'll
after
do
all
that
the
this year.
games. Are you gonna do
Yeah,
that this year?
depending on where we are and where I am specifically, we're connected. I do plan to do a little hats hits. We do that on Twitter or X now. I give my 5 takeaways on Friday night before midnight. I'll drop them for whatever around the state, and I'll do a little IG special, maybe even an X or Twitter special this year too. So we will plan on doing that throughout the year and interact with the fans that way too. So that's
Yeah.
on the docket.
I love it. I jump on there, man, talk a little trash, and I listen and see what's going on. But I appreciate you, Matt. You have a great high school weekend. Where you going tomorrow night? Where you going to be at tomorrow, Thursday? Where you going to?
I
What
am
game?
actually just going to be right down the road from my house. I've been so busy and swamped with getting all this stuff that's on my desk, even stories that we have our writers have. We got a story on 2 juniors you can check out. Robert Anderson just sent in on Jeziel Hart and Jace Rhodes from 2-time defending state champ North Cross, and just a smattering of previous. But I'll be down the road at Kempsville and Salem.
Okay.
Right by my house. So that'll be the game I'll be at on Thursday. So, but I will be making some trips all across and then watching, as you know, games all over the web through NFHS and Huddle and all that good stuff.
There it is,
Love it.
man. Thank you. Well, we appreciate you, Matt. You enjoy the rest of your evening, man. We'll be in touch again for another shot at you on our show. So we appreciate you, man. Take care.
Look forward to it, guys. Take care. Have a good one.
Thanks, Matt. See you, buddy.
Once again, that's the great Matt Hatfield. Appreciate him rocking Vicktory Life. That's my dude. Danny, it's crazy, man. I don't know how he remembers all those names. I forgot the UVA's quarterback that I just saw play a few years ago, and he's naming guys. Keep in mind, we didn't even get into Division 1 and 2. We just started with 3, and and he went fast so he can get all those names in because he knows we don't have as much time as he has on his show. But for those that love high school football, and he knows college too, and it's not just football. He does baseball, lacrosse, soccer, wrestling. He is just a guy I just love talking to. But this is fun, Danny. We took a break, man, and we're back at it, man. Was there a game? I know you're going to watch Tech on Saturday. Is there any other games you're going to check out this weekend? I don't even have the schedule for Saturday and Sunday. There's a big game on Monday, right? Labor Day, Chick-fil-A kickoff. Who's playing?
Yeah, I gotta double check who's in the Chick-fil-A game this year, but I mean the other noon kickoff, dude, is number 14 Clemson and number 1 Georgia. I mean, it's like right out of the gate.
That's at noon?
It's a noon game. Yeah,
I ain't going nowhere. We play at noon, right?
I know.
Tech?
Yeah, I'm actually gonna be on the road. I'm heading down to the Outer Banks this weekend for the week with my family, which is gonna be a heck of a lot of fun. But yeah, so the Georgia Clemson game is gonna be big, and just to commend Matt for the encyclopedia of knowledge that he is when it comes to high school sports. Man, I appreciate that he remembers that I'm from Chantilly. And it's funny that he brought up the 2010 Battlefield team, because that was back when I was playing my senior year playing for Chantilly. I remember we got absolutely boat raced by Lake Braddock in the region championship game, and they got beat by Battlefield. And Battlefield was a team that we felt was built similar to the way that we were. And Lake Braddock had a ton of a ton of guys that went on to play at the next level. From Niebrick, their quarterback, went to UConn. They got Zanaletto, the wide receiver, ended up going to Penn State for a little bit. So it's crazy because they had a back by the name of Bobo Beathard,
Yeah.
who was the grandson
Yeah.
of Bobby Beathard, the great Redskins executive. He's in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and he
Yeah.
brought them a state championship in 2010. And it was 2010. He also talked about how up in Northern Virginia, a lot of times you'd get the regular season matchup and then the other team would win the playoff matchup. Well, in 2010, we played Westfield in the regular season and in the playoffs. And we are still to this day the only team to beat Westfield twice in the same year at Chantilly. It still hasn't been done.
Nugget.
It still hasn't been done. Yeah, it still hasn't been done
Yeah.
since we left. And then we got beat by Centerville in double overtime in the regular season. Absolute slugfest. Great football game. We still maintain that Manny Smith was down when he got into the end zone for the difference maker in that game, right? Me and my buddies were doing our fantasy football draft, my high school football teammates. We still talk about all that stuff. But then we came back out in the playoffs and we smacked them around and ended up beating them to go to the region championship against Lake Braddock, where we got smacked around. So
but that's the beauty. That give back.
It is, right? And
that give back.
Man, reminiscing like this with you and just chopping up the games like we do every week, and August coming to an end. I know it brings back a lot of memories for you, and it does for me too. It's high school, it's college, it's everything, man. It's my favorite time of year.
I do. I love it, man. I love it. And I feel like it brings us together, especially when we have all this other nonsense going on in the world and the country. So
Yeah.
just want to thank our guest, Chris Coleman from Tech Sideline, coming on. And also, as we just mentioned, Matt Hatfield from Rivals VA Preps and his show, 757 Sports Talk at the Sportsplex of Virginia Beach. Phenomenal guys, 2 class acts, 2 insightful, knowledgeable sports analysts and guys I always check for. So let's end the show with a legacy shout out. Remember, we get somebody we want to shout out. I'm gonna keep it real simple. I just want to shout out, especially up here in Northern Virginia with the second week of school. I do this every year when we do this legacy podcast, but I'm gonna legacy shout out just all the teachers out here. Up here in Northern Virginia right now, we got COVID. It's already spreading throughout the schools.
Yep.
New rules, new policies, cell phone stuff. But regardless of that, teachers still come to work armed and prepared to help these kids achieve their academic and athletic goals. They deal with everything from behavioral challenges, AC break-in, parents who might not be on board. There's different things they do. But to me, many nights and many days, they are the superheroes because they are the foundation of our youth, because they're teaching them and getting them ready for the real world. So legacy shout out to all the teachers out there holding it down, from Nova to the 804 to Maryland, DC, New York. I don't care where you at. Thank you. I'm biased though. My mom's a teacher for over 50 years, but I appreciate all y'all out there doing that. Can't thank you enough, man. I'm here because of great teachers and great educators. And that includes daycare teachers too. Because God knows, I went to a daycare the other day and I'm like, it's loud, it's diapers, it's it ain't daddy daycare. It's crazy. Yeah, really appreciate all y'all. But just want to shout them out. And Danny, do you have anybody or anyone or any group?
Yeah,
of
people? I can actually build off that, man. And I think that was beautifully said. I've long felt the teachers are some of the most underappreciated people on the planet, really. What they put up with, what they do. They're some of the best people you come across. And the guy that I'm going to give a legacy shout out to, I did not have the pleasure of taking one of his classes as a student at Chantilly High School, but he was one of my coaches. And at that time, he was the running backs coach as well as one of the defensive backs coach. So he was my position group, and he played defensive back he played running back actually, I believe, at Hampton City at JMU. And it's Sean Curry, who's the head coach now at Chantilly High School. And I will always be indebted to Coach Curry just for being, so supportive. I was not as gifted as maybe some folks in the Vick family have been with athleticism and size and speed and strength and that sort of thing. If for anybody out there listening or watching, if you see me in real life, I'm not a particularly large or athletic individual. I figured some things out, right? And I loved all of my high school football playing days, but Coach Curry was just a tremendous leader, and I couldn't pick a better person to lead the Chantilly football program right now, and he's been there for a few years now. And hearing that news years ago when he got that job, I was just over the moon. So wishing everybody a healthy football season, right? And best of luck to everybody out there. But I had to get the plug in there for my guy, my guy, Coach
Nah,
Curry. He's the
great
man.
shout out. Great shout out, man. Again, that's that impact, man. You're a grown man. You still remember what he did for you
Yep.
and how he shaped and impacted your life,
He
man. So
did.
God bless him, man. And God bless all of y'all that support me and Danny, that check for us on X, aka Twitter, Facebook. Make sure you subscribe to all our different platforms on SoundCloud, Spotify, soon to be iTunes, but we're on that. And of course, our YouTube channel. Again, once again, thank you to Chris Coleman, Tech Sideline, for all that he does when he jumps on and his stuff he does with Tech Sideline. Matt Hatfield, who is a guru, a straight G at breaking down names, high school matchups. I'm telling you,
Amazing.
he don't miss.
He does.
I can't wait to get the reels out, man, on TikTok and Facebook and IG. But we appreciate all y'all, man. And again, everyone have a safe Labor Day. Appreciate your loved ones, man. Never take a day for granted. Spread positivity. And like I say every episode, no matter where you go, no matter what you do, make sure you have a positive impact. You have a great legacy. On behalf of Danny Nokes, I'm Dwight Vick. Thank you for all that are involved in the Vicktory Life movement. We appreciate y'all, and we will see y'all soon. We are out. Thank you.